Every individual carries within them a shadow, an unseen and often unacknowledged aspect of the self. The less a person integrates this shadow into their conscious awareness, the darker, denser, and more influential it becomes over their life. When one recognizes their own inferiorities, there exists the opportunity for self-improvement and personal growth. However, if these aspects remain buried beneath the surface, cut off from consciousness, they never undergo transformation. Instead, they fester in the unconscious, waiting for an unguarded moment to erupt suddenly, often in destructive or self-sabotaging ways. These hidden elements create an unseen barrier, an internal roadblock that disrupts even the most well-intentioned plans and actions. Carl Jung, one of the most influential figures in modern psychology, identified two primary types of shadows. The first is the personal shadow, which consists of the suppressed, unknown, or less desirable parts of an individual's personality. The second is the collective shadow, a deeper and more expansive dark side embedded within societies, cultures, and humanity as a whole. When discussing the personal shadow, Jung describes it as the thing a person has no wish to be. This shadow represents the aspects of our nature that we either consciously deny or unconsciously suppress, qualities that, for one reason or another, we have deemed unacceptable, shameful, or even evil. Each of us harbors a collection of traits we would rather not acknowledge. These may include perceived weaknesses, socially inappropriate tendencies, or emotional impulses that challenge our carefully crafted self-image. Often these hidden aspects come to the surface during moments of emotional distress, intoxication, or heightened anxiety. A seemingly mild-mannered individual might unexpectedly lash out with a cutting remark, revealing a bitterness they were unaware they harbored. When we refuse to recognize certain qualities in ourselves, we frequently project them onto others. In this way, what we despise in others is often a reflection of the unaccepted parts of our own psyche. Some individuals become partially aware of their shadow, managing to keep it under a degree of ego control. However, many people remain oblivious to its existence, denying any association with the darker aspects of their being. In such cases, the shadow functions autonomously, manifesting in unpredictable emotional outbursts, irritability, or even cruel behavior. Jung frequently emphasized the significance of acknowledging the shadow in the context of psychotherapy. He believed that bringing unconscious material into awareness was essential for true psychological growth and healing. Although the shadow is typically perceived in a negative light, it also holds potential for profound personal development. In fact, engaging with and exploring one's shadow can unlock hidden strengths, creativity, and deep psychological insight. Jung himself stated that the shadow displays a number of good qualities, such as normal instincts, appropriate reactions, realistic insights, creative impulses, etc. Marie-Louise von Franz, one of Jung's closest collaborators, expanded on this idea, emphasizing that the shadow is not always an adversary. Instead, she likened it to another person, one with whom we must learn to coexist, sometimes by resisting, sometimes by surrendering, and at other times by responding with understanding and compassion. The shadow only becomes destructive when it is completely ignored, misunderstood, or denied. Within the shadow lie countless qualities and untapped potentials that, if left unexplored, result in a diminished and impoverished sense of self. When we fail to integrate these aspects into our personality, we create internal snags that limit our personal growth. For example, a person who associates assertiveness with arrogance may suppress their ability to speak up, fearing that they will be perceived as rude. As a result, they may struggle with self-advocacy, miss out on career opportunities, or feel invisible in social settings. Meanwhile, when encountering someone who confidently asserts themselves, they may feel an unexplainable resentment or guilt, feelings that arise from their unacknowledged shadow. The more these emotions are suppressed, the darker and more powerful the shadow becomes. The key to personal growth is not repression, but integration, learning to bring these hidden aspects into awareness and allowing the ego to relinquish its rigid control. One of the most common ways individuals encounter their shadow is through dreams. Jung observed that the shadow frequently appears in the dream world as a person of the same gender as the dreamer. This dream figure serves as a symbolic representation of the unconscious, often acting as a critical voice that confronts the dreamer with their own shortcomings. The experience can be unsettling, leaving the individual feeling ashamed or exposed. However, rather than resisting these revelations, one must recognize them as an opportunity for growth and self-awareness. The process of shadow integration, also known as shadow work, is a difficult but transformative journey. It involves facing the hidden dimensions of the psyche, engaging in deep self-reflection, and embracing both the light and the darkness within. This work is not for the faint-hearted. In many ways, it mirrors the legendary labors of Hercules, a series of grueling trials that test one's strength, wisdom, and resilience. Shadow work requires ongoing effort, radical honesty, and the willingness to engage with uncomfortable truths. One must observe their emotional reactions, recognize the projections they cast onto others, and analyze the themes that appear in their dreams. By courageously bringing the darkness to light, rather than attempting to destroy it, the individual gains a deeper sense of wholeness and self-acceptance. As Jung eloquently states, there is no light without shadow and no psychic wholeness without imperfection. True self-development is not about striving for an unattainable state of perfection, but rather embracing the totality of one's being. The lifelong process of individuation seeks to harmonize the conscious and unconscious aspects of the self, aligning the ego with the self, the totality of one's psyche. Although facing the shadow may seem daunting, the ultimate reward is authenticity. The pursuit of truth, however painful, brings genuine relief and personal freedom. Sadly, many individuals resist this inner work, preferring the comfort of ignorance over the challenge of self-discovery. Yet those who embark on this journey find that confronting the shadow is not just necessary. It is one of the most profound steps toward true psychological and spiritual enlightenment. The shadow is not limited to an individual's personal experiences or unconscious mind. Rather, it can extend beyond personal existence and seep into the collective fabric of a society. This is where we encounter the collective shadow, the hidden, obscured, or lesser-known aspects of a culture that remain largely unacknowledged or outright denied. Unlike the personal shadow, which resides within an individual's psyche, the collective shadow emerges from societal norms, historical events, and deeply ingrained ideologies. It is composed of those traits, values, and actions that contradict the publicly embraced morals and ethical standards of a given group. The collective shadow is vast, complex, and often terrifying in its implications, for it represents the immeasurable harm inflicted by humanity upon itself, its environment, and future generations. The devastating consequences of this shadow linger across time, shaping the trajectory of societies and cultures in ways that are frequently invisible to those who live within them. We observe the collective shadow in the projection of perceived darkness and inferiority onto others, in widespread acts of violence and systemic oppression, in the deliberate erasure of histories, and in the refusal to take responsibility for past and present transgressions. It manifests in wars, genocides, massacres, colonization, racial discrimination, economic exploitation, and environmental destruction. Yet it is not always overt or brutal. Sometimes it operates subtly, concealed beneath seemingly noble intentions. Missionary work, for example, often sought to spread religion, yet it simultaneously suppressed indigenous languages and cultural identities, an Orwellian phenomenon that persists today in various forms of globalization and cultural assimilation. Like the personal shadow, the collective shadow is both omnipresent and elusive, shaping the lives of individuals in ways they may not consciously perceive. It reveals itself externally in the horrors of human suffering: persecution, war, poverty, malnutrition, slavery, environmental degradation, and the loss of entire cultures. Internally, it takes root in the psyche, fostering self-hatred, alienation from one's identity, cultural inferiority complexes, and cycles of trauma that pass through generations. Many individuals struggle with internalized oppression, experiencing shame regarding their heritage, language, or background. Others, unable to process their pain, direct their suffering outward, perpetuating violence, resentment, or seeking revenge so that others might share in their affliction. Historically, the collective shadow has been framed as evil. In Christian theology, it corresponds to the idea of the devil, a force of destruction that consumes those who succumb to it, stripping them of their humanity and turning them into instruments of malevolence. Jung, however, proposed that the key to confronting such darkness is not moral condemnation, but self-awareness and integration. He believed that one must recognize not only the good they are capable of achieving, but also the depravity they might enact. Without this awareness, individuals and societies alike fall prey to the very evils they seek to oppose, blindly repeating history's darkest patterns. When a society acknowledges a particular issue but refuses to take ownership of it, choosing instead to deny, deflect, or project blame onto others, it becomes a shadow issue. For this reason, accepting responsibility on moral, political, and spiritual levels is paramount. The courage to confront and integrate one's own darkness alleviates the burden of projecting it onto others. Consider how historical traumas, wars, holocausts, slavery, colonization, and systemic oppression continue to shape the present. The repercussions of these atrocities do not simply vanish with time. They persist in the form of intergenerational trauma, economic disparities, cultural erasure, and lingering societal divisions. Yet, rather than addressing these legacies head-on, many nations and communities prefer to bury them, claiming a desire to move forward and leave the past behind. Denial is often the easiest and most immediate response. Attempts to reckon with the past have taken many forms. Some governments have issued public apologies for historical injustices. Some have established truth and reconciliation commissions, offered reparations, or enshrined remembrance through monuments and memorials. Others have initiated cultural preservation efforts, seeking to restore what was lost. But the crucial question remains: how can we engage with the past in a way that fosters deep, lasting healing, rather than mere symbolic gestures? True integration of the collective shadow cannot be achieved through policy alone. It requires widespread acknowledgement, education, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. The act of remembering and articulating what is often deemed unspeakable is an excruciating process for all involved: victims, perpetrators, bystanders, and witnesses alike. Genuine reconciliation can only occur when the full weight of suffering, betrayal, pain, and moral outrage is acknowledged, when those responsible accept accountability, and when society as a whole commits to meaningful transformation. Truth-telling, therefore, becomes the most effective and necessary step in breaking free from the grip of the collective shadow. A chilling example of mass psychosis driven by the collective shadow is Nazi Germany. Millions of individuals, swept up by ideology and nationalistic fervor, surrendered to their personal shadows, aligning themselves with the Nazi Party. Under its influence, they committed atrocities far beyond what they might have imagined possible under normal circumstances. In this way, the personal shadow serves as a gateway to the collective shadow. Once an individual loses awareness of their inner darkness, they become vulnerable to the darkness of the larger group. Thus, before one can effectively resist the collective shadow, they must first confront their personal shadow. Addressing one's own internal struggles prevents unconscious submission to societal darkness, reducing the likelihood of being manipulated by propaganda, prejudice, or mass hysteria. A society composed of self-aware individuals, those who have faced and integrated their shadows, is less likely to succumb to cycles of violence and destruction. As Thich Nhat Hanh wisely observed, if we practice mindfulness, we will know how to look deeply into the nature of war, and with our insight, wake people up so that together we can avoid repeating the same horrors again and again. The war is in us, but is also in everyone. Everything is ready to explode, and we are all co-responsible. Ultimately, the collective shadow is not a distant, abstract concept. It lives within each of us. It shapes our perceptions, influences our actions, and determines the course of history. Only by confronting it with courage, wisdom, and a relentless commitment to truth can we hope to break free from its grip and forge a more conscious, ethical, and enlightened world. To conclude, it is imperative that we first recognize and confront our personal shadow, engaging in deep and often arduous introspection. This process requires honesty, not only with ourselves, but also in our interactions with others. It involves keenly observing our emotional reactions, reflecting on our dreams, and uncovering the unconscious patterns that shape our thoughts and behaviors. Only through such rigorous self-examination can we prevent ourselves from becoming unwitting victims of our own shadow, lost in a cycle of unconscious projections. By doing so, we unlock the potential for personal growth, allowing the positive qualities within us, those that may have long remained dormant, to emerge. This transformation not only enriches our own lives, but also has a ripple effect, positively influencing the people around us. Once we have taken responsibility for our personal shadow, we are then better equipped to recognize and engage with the collective shadow. Becoming conscious of its existence safeguards us from falling under its influence. It also compels us to take action, addressing the deep-seated denial of important social and historical issues, as well as the widespread lack of both individual and collective initiative to create meaningful change. The bravery required to confront our own inner darkness ultimately extends beyond ourselves. It provides relief to others, lifting the burden that might otherwise fall upon them. Truth-telling emerges as the most effective and ethical means of dealing with the painful legacies of the past. When societies fail to acknowledge and integrate their collective shadow, it does not simply disappear. Rather, it festers, growing darker and more insidious until it can no longer be contained. In such cases, history has shown that denial and suppression only pave the way for the repetition of past atrocities. The weight of unacknowledged suffering lingers through generations, shaping conflicts, injustices, and cycles of violence that could have been prevented through honest reckoning. Thus, embracing the shadow, both personally and collectively, is not merely an intellectual exercise, but a moral imperative. The willingness to bear our own darkness serves as a beacon for others, demonstrating that healing is possible when we face difficult truths rather than evade them. By choosing to engage with our past with sincerity, accountability, and courage, we create the opportunity for true integration and transformation. I hope this discussion on the shadow has provided valuable insight. If you found this video informative and thought-provoking, you can support the channel by becoming a patron on Patreon, as well as by liking, commenting, or sharing the content. Your engagement helps foster deeper conversations and ensures that these important topics continue to reach a wider audience. Thank you for watching.